Today is peculiar for us in the history of this particular church and this particular ministry. Some of you may not know that on Tuesday, March 13th, 2001, while on a ministerial trip in the northern part of Florida, we suffered a bus accident. And we're grateful to God because in that bus accident, there was no loss of life. And so we want to stop and take time today to remember God's hand of grace and God's hand of mercy that was upon us in preserving our lives. I want to take a few minutes and just read the names of everyone who was on the bus on the day of that accident. And if you're in the building, please rest on your feet as I call your name. Joyce Bellamy, Leon Campbell II, Barack Clark, Ithiel Clark, Margaret Clark, Shemesh Clark, Keroy Fordham, Miriam Gregory, Liston Gregory, Samuel Hicks, Nathaniel Jacobs, Eric Johnson II, Carolyn McKinnon, Marta McKinnon, Matthew McKinnon, Maidra McKinnon, Melena McKinnon, Kavicia Moore, Tyra Moore, Mary Myers, Bishop Henry L. Porter, Zakur Porter, Edward Stanford, Janine Stanford, Rosa Stanley, Ruby White, Thomas Williamson II, Early Dean Wilson II, and Kristen Wilson. We thank God that of those 29 names, everyone made it out alive. And so I've asked my father if he would share today some of his recollections from that day back in 2011. If you would, rest on your feet, receive with me my father, our founder, our Bishop Henry L. Porter.
Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Please be seated. We were traveling on a trip, as we had done since the 70s, 1973, when we took our first tour. Many years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of miles. We were going to a prison to visit someone. And I had just come from standing near the front, and I was going back to my seat. I'd asked everybody, please make sure we just secure things because we don't want anything to fall regardless of any situation. That was just regular and routine. Well, when I got back to my seat, I sat down and it was raining. The bus swerved a bit. There was a truck in front of us. And when we went to go the other way, he went that way. We went to go the other way, he went that way. Now the rest, I remember because you're in a point of shock, a situation. And we hit that truck. I thought that we had gone off the side because something fell and my hand reached up. I did not know that it had actually affected my finger. But we were going and people were sort of making noise, not loud screams like that, but screams, but not panic, horror. The Reverend Sam Hicks, Sam I call him, was driving. He had control of that bus as we swerved in that rainy weather. We landed just before, and I say landed because it seems like we were flying, not from speed, but from the bus traveling. And right there was a lake, and the bus stopped. We got out through the windows, through the doors, because the door was so badly damaged. Rescue crews were there within minutes. I didn't know all that was happening. Sam was sitting in the bus seat, and he seemed very composed. we were moving out, getting everybody off the bus. And then these people came, the emergency people came, and they came with the jaws of life because there was no other way to cut him out of that bus because the front of the bus had slammed and was up against his legs, and he was pinned in. I stood on the outside as they were doing that work, seeing that everybody was taken care of. They were moved. The people were very efficient in what they did. But I saw them when Sam was carried out. I was in tears because I saw that he was very badly damaged. It was, to us, just tragic. Nothing's happened like that. We went to the hospital. The Reverend Green was there. He stayed with us the whole time. Friends and your father's friends, forsake not. And he was there in the hospital. We were lined up in hospital beds, different ones of us in trauma units. But we were okay, except he had to go into emergency surgery. The thing that I remember most vividly is we had just left the bishop at the Church of God in Christ, Bishop Weaver, and I had preached the night before, Ram in the Bush. And as we were preaching that night, preached Ram in the Bush, my brother, Reverend Stephen, was sitting on the front row, and he said, the strange thing happened. He said, when we started going across that place just before we got to the lake, a big ram in the spiritual world came out of there and took the bus and stopped it with his horns, a ram. And he stood there and he braced himself. That was what happened in the spirit. And kept us from going into that lake, that river. So it was very important to us. We prayed, but the saints prayed. All of you came to our rescue. His wife, Alice, stood by his side, and because of her expertise in nursing, she was able to spot when something wasn't going just right, to tell those nurses, get in here, get the doctor here, something needs to be done, something is happening here. And he went through that with such power. We were able to go through it. Reverend Stanford still remembers to this day that ram coming out of that bush. It was it was heart-shaking for us. There are many people who tried to comment on it, and I said, we really can't comment on something like that. Many things that happened after that, especially when they wanted to sue us for the accident, and we were not to blame. But the Lord healed us, and over the subsequent years, he blessed us over the time. Sam recovered, came out of that. We drove up very frequently to Melbourne, would go up there, drive across the state to make sure that he was okay. And so then we had a heroes program because all of these lives were spared. Every one of us who was on that bus. And subsequently, I have seen so many bus accidents on television where there were no survivors, where people were very badly damaged, where people died. But God preserved us. And I'm so happy that we've taken this time to recognize, to first thank God for all he's done, and to recognize those who stood in the gap, who suffered, because honor has to always be public. It's always public, always loud and long. And we are appreciative. Thank you, Pastor Porter, for taking this time to recognize Reverend Hicks, to thank the congregation for their prayers and continued prayers, to pray so that we all can come together and pray for the church, because we're one. And so I'm grateful for this afternoon, but I'm happy for my strength. I even when I went back after all this is over, my finger was still hurting. They took me to a therapist and all of that. But then it just wasn't working. So I went back to the company and said, I need another person to look at me. And they sent me to the specialist right down the street here. She looked at me because they told me do these exercises, do all of that. But when they took me, the lady said, let me show you what has happened to you. And she said, I don't know why when people don't know what they're doing, they just won't tell you they don't know what they're doing. She says, here's what can happen to your finger. And then she showed me where the tendons had gone and that my thumb, my finger here, would actually, over time, turn back the other way because the tendons were not holding it. So she put my hand in warm sand, and she dealt with me to get it back because it was hurting. I was playing the piano like that with the finger sticking out. I didn't know it was so serious. So that's what happened from that accident. But I'm always remembering, came back to life. She did what she did. She says, I don't understand why people don't know what they're doing. Won't just tell you. Because she said your finger could just keep rolling back because the ligaments would pull it backward. So I thank God for that. And I surely thank God for the Reverend Samuel Hicks.
Reverend Hicks, if you would join me on stage.